In a forgotten, run-down neighborhood under a gloomy sky, a smart 17-year-old black girl struggling to afford college steps into a bakery steeped in prejudice. There, a heavily tattooed Hell's Angel is met with suspicion. When he unknowingly loses his wallet saving a young boy from an accident, the girl, having witnessed everything, doesn't hesitate to pay for his meal, sacrificing her shot at a scholarship. What she doesn't know is that this single act of courage will change her life forever. Before we dive in this story, let us know where you're watching from. We love to hear your thought. The overcast sky pressed down on the rundown neighborhood like a heavy blanket, threatening rain that might never come. Maya Thompson, 17 and lean from too many skipped meals, walked purposefully down the cracked sidewalk at 7:30 a.m. Her clothes were worn but clean, pressed with the kind of care that spoke of pride despite poverty. Around her, boarded storefronts and for rent signs told the story of a community forgotten, though occasional bright murals fought bravely against the decay. Maya paused at the rusted mailbox outside her grandmother's small house, her heart hammering as she pulled out an envelope bearing the university seal. Her fingers trembled as she tore it open, scanning the words that would determine her future. A scholarship offer, but only partial. The brief joy that lit her face crumbled as reality set in. She still needed $8,000 she didn't have. The screen door creaked as she approached the front porch where Grandma Rose sat in her weathered chair, oxygen tank humming softly beside her. At 72, Rose carried herself with the dignity of someone who had weathered every storm life could throw, though her recent coughing fits and the dark circles under her eyes spoke of battles she was fighting in silence. "What's that letter, baby?" Rose asked, though her knowing smile suggested she already suspected. Maya sat on the porch steps, the acceptance letter heavy in her hands. "I got in, Grandma. Full scholarship to pre-law." She paused, swallowing hard. "But I still need $8,000 for room and board." Rose's face lit with fierce pride, even as worry flickered behind her eyes. She had been hiding how sick she really was, not wanting Maya to sacrifice college to become a caretaker. "We'll find a way, child. The Lord provides." The morning stretched between them, heavy with unspoken concerns. Finally, Rose reached into her worn purse and pulled out exact change counted carefully, bills and coins that represented weeks of small savings. "I've been wanting those lemon pastries from Murphy's downtown," Rose said, pressing the money into Maya's palm. "Would you fetch them for me? They're my favorite." Maya hesitated, knowing every dollar mattered in their household, but seeing how much this small luxury meant to her grandmother, she nodded. "Of course, Grandma." The walk to downtown took Maya through a journey of contrasts. Her neighborhood of repair shops and empty lots gradually gave way to cleaner streets as she approached the railroad tracks that literally divided the town. On the other side lay the prosperous downtown district with its neat storefronts and flowering planters. Maya checked her old watch, 8:45 a.m. She needed to get to the library by noon to research additional scholarships before it closed at 2. The pressure of time made her walk faster, her worn shoes slapping against the pavement. As she crossed into downtown, the difference was unmistakable. Here, white faces dominated the sidewalks, and those who noticed her at all regarded her with suspicion or studied indifference. Some crossed the street rather than share the same sidewalk. Maya had grown used to such reactions, but they still stung. Murphy's Bakery and Cafe sat on Main Street like a warm beacon, its windows glowing with golden light and displaying an array of fresh pastries that made Maya's empty stomach clench with hunger. She pushed open the door, immediately aware of how she stood out among the well-dressed customers enjoying their morning coffee and leisurely conversation. The conversations didn't exactly stop when she entered, but they shifted, voices dropping to whispers, eyes flickering in her direction before quickly looking away. Maya approached the counter where a middle-aged woman with carefully styled hair looked up with the kind of professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'd like a dozen lemon pastries, please," Maya said politely. "That'll be 10 minutes while we prepare a fresh batch," the woman replied, gesturing toward a small corner table. "You can wait over there." Maya settled into the chair, acutely aware of the sideways glances from other customers. She pulled out her notebook and tried to focus on scholarship research, but the atmosphere around her was thick with judgment she could feel but couldn't challenge. Outside the window, Main Street bustled with morning activity, parents dropping children off at school, business owners unlocking their shops, the ordinary rhythm of a community she existed on the edges of but had never truly belonged to. Maya walked briskly down Main Street toward Murphy's Bakery, her grandmother's precious pastry money clutched safely in her pocket. The morning bustle surrounded her, parents dropping children off at school, business owners unlocking their shops, the comfortable rhythm of a community going about its daily routine. She moved purposefully but carefully, always aware of how she was perceived in this part of town. At 9:15 a.m., the roar of a motorcycle suddenly cut through the morning air like thunder, turning every head on the street. Maya paused, watching as a massive Harley-Davidson rumbled down Main Street, its chrome gleaming in the sun that had finally broken through the overcast sky. The rider was a man in his mid-30s, wearing a black leather vest over a faded t-shirt, his arms marked with intricate tattoos that told stories Maya couldn't read from this distance. His weathered face spoke of roads traveled and experiences that had etched themselves into every line around his eyes. As he guided the motorcycle to a stop outside Murphy's Bakery, Maya noticed how he sat for a moment after killing the engine, running his hands through his dark hair with the weight of exhaustion. The reaction on the sidewalk was immediate and telling. Parents instinctively pulled their children closer, conversation ceased mid-sentence, and whispers began to ripple through the gathering crowd. Maya watched faces transform from curiosity to suspicion to outright hostility, all directed at a man who had done nothing more than arrive. The biker, Jake, though Maya didn't know his name yet, removed his helmet slowly, seemingly oblivious to the stares. Or perhaps, Maya thought, he was simply used to them. There was a resignation in his movements that spoke of someone who had learned to expect the worst from people's first impressions. "Mama, why is everyone staring at that man?" a little girl asked her mother in a voice that carried in the suddenly quiet street. "Shh, Emily. Don't look. People like that are dangerous," the mother replied, pulling her daughter away. Maya felt a familiar pang in her chest, the same feeling she got when people crossed the street to avoid her or watched her suspiciously in stores. She recognized the injustice of being judged before being known, condemned before being heard. Just then, a bright red ball bounced energetically into the street, followed immediately by Tommy, an 8-year-old boy with cafe au lait skin and eyes bright with the single-minded focus that only children possess when chasing a beloved toy. He darted between parked cars, completely absorbed in retrieving his ball, utterly unaware of the approaching danger. Maya's blood turned to ice as she spotted the delivery truck barreling down Main Street. The driver, a man in his 20s, was looking down at his phone, texting while driving, completely oblivious to the small figure who had just stepped directly into his path. "No," Maya started to call out, but she was too far away, her voice lost in the rumble of the truck's engine. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. The truck continued its deadly approach while Tommy bent down to pick up his ball, still unaware. Maya began to run toward the street, but she knew with sickening certainty that she would never reach him in time. Then Jake moved. Maya watched in amazement as the biker, who had been standing beside his motorcycle adjusting his gloves, suddenly exploded into action. He must have spotted the danger in the same instant Maya did, but unlike her, he was close enough to act. Without a moment's hesitation, without any concern for his own safety, Jake launched himself forward. His long legs covered the distance to Tommy in powerful strides, his boots pounding against the asphalt. At the last possible second, just as the truck bore down on them both, Jake dove forward, scooping the startled boy up in his arms and rolling them both toward the sidewalk. The truck roared past, its driver still oblivious, missing them by mere inches. Jake's leather jacket scraped against the rough asphalt, tearing and leaving his elbow bloody. His knee took a hard impact that left him limping, but Tommy was completely unharmed, protected by Jake's body throughout the rolling fall. Maya stood frozen, her heart hammering with the adrenaline of witnessing near tragedy transformed into heroism. Around her, the crowd that had been whispering suspiciously about Jake moments before now rushed forward, but their reactions were mixed and complicated. Tommy, more shocked than hurt, began to cry, the kind of delayed reaction children have when they suddenly realize they were in danger. Jake, ignoring his own injuries, immediately focused on comforting the frightened boy. "Hey there, buddy, you're okay," Jake said, his voice incredibly gentle and warm, carrying none of the roughness his appearance might have suggested. He knelt down to Tommy's eye level, his large tattooed hands surprisingly tender as he checked the boy for any signs of injury. "That was scary, wasn't it? But you're safe now. What's your name?" "Tommy," the boy sniffled, his tears already beginning to slow under Jake's calm reassurance. "Well, Tommy, you've got to be really careful around streets, okay? Cars can't always see you, and they can't stop as fast as you can run. Your ball isn't worth getting hurt over, right?" Maya watched this interaction with growing amazement. She saw the genuine concern in Jake's eyes, the way he spoke to Tommy with respect rather than condescension, the careful way he examined the boy's arms and legs to make sure nothing was broken. This was not the behavior of a dangerous man, this was someone with deep reserves of kindness and protective instinct. But the crowd's reaction was troubling and complex. While some people murmured approval and gratitude, others remained suspicious, their prejudices too deeply ingrained to be easily overcome by evidence. "Probably staged," Maya heard one man mutter to his wife. "Bikers are always looking for ways to make themselves look good. Probably had that kid ready to run into traffic." "I don't trust it," agreed another voice. "People like that, they're always working some angle." Maya felt anger rising in her chest at the injustice of it. Here was a man who had literally risked his life to save a child, and people were still finding ways to paint him as the villain. She wanted to speak up, to tell these people what she had witnessed, but she also knew that her voice carried little weight in this crowd. Tommy's mother, Carol, came running from the nearby playground where she had been chatting with other parents. When she saw her son in the arms of a leather-clad stranger, her first instinct was protective fear. "Tommy, what happened? Are you okay?" She rushed forward and somewhat roughly pulled her son away from Jake, holding him close while her eyes darted suspiciously between Jake and the crowd. "Mama, the motorcycle man saved me," Tommy said excitedly, his fear already forgotten in the way children bounce back from trauma. "A big truck was coming and he caught me like Superman." Several people in the crowd began explaining what had happened, their accounts varying wildly based on their own biases. Some praised Jake's heroism, while others found ways to diminish or question his motives. Carol's expression softened slightly as she began to understand what had truly occurred. "Thank you," she said to Jake, though her voice remained cautious and formal. "Thank you for helping him." Jake stood up slowly, favoring his injured leg, and brushed the dirt and gravel from his torn jacket. "Just glad he's okay," he said simply. "Kids that age, they don't always see the dangers around them. Good thing someone was watching out for him." As the crowd began to disperse, Maya noticed how quickly people's attention shifted away from Jake's heroic action. The suspicious whispers resumed, the sideways glances continued, and within minutes it was as if the rescue had never happened. Jake was once again just a dangerous-looking biker who didn't belong in their nice neighborhood. Across the street, Maya and Jake's eyes met for a brief moment. She saw something in his gaze, a mixture of sadness and resignation that spoke of a lifetime of being misunderstood and misjudged. Without thinking, Maya gave him a small nod of acknowledgement, a gesture that said, "I saw what really happened. I know who you really are." Jake looked surprised by her recognition, unused to finding allies in unexpected places. He nodded back slightly, a ghost of a smile crossing his weathered features before both of them continued on their separate paths. Maya watched as Jake limped toward the bakery, his torn jacket and bloody elbow testament to his selfless action. She felt a deep sense of injustice at how he was being treated, but also a growing curiosity about the man behind the intimidating exterior. Following him into Murphy's bakery, Maya immediately noticed how the atmosphere changed when Jake entered. The warm buzz of conversation died abruptly, replaced by uncomfortable silence and sideways glances. Parents instinctively moved their children to tables farther away, and an elderly couple near the door actually gathered their things and left, abandoning their half-finished breakfast. The waitress, a nervous woman in her 40s with carefully styled hair, approached Jake's table with obvious reluctance. She held her order pad like a shield and took his order, coffee and a burger, with minimal eye contact, her discomfort palpable to everyone in the room. Maya settled at her corner table to wait for her pastries, watching this painful display of prejudice with growing indignation. She observed how Jake handled the hostile atmosphere with quiet dignity, saying please and thank you, eating carefully despite obviously being hungry, making no attempt to defend himself against the unspoken accusations hanging in the air like smoke. The contrast was heartbreaking. This was the same man who had just risked everything to save a child, now being treated like a criminal simply for existing in this space. Maya felt ashamed of her community, and proud of the stranger who bore their prejudice with such grace. "Order up," came the call from behind the counter. Her grandmother's lemon pastries were ready. As Maya prepared to leave, she glanced at her watch. 9:45 a.m. She still had time to make it to the library for her crucial scholarship research, but something in Jake's sudden change of expression caught her attention. He was patting his pockets frantically, his face going pale with what looked like panic. Maya hesitated at the door, sensing that something significant was about to happen, something that would test not just Jake's character but her own as well. Jake's face went pale as he searched frantically through his pockets, checking and rechecking places his wallet should have been. The panic in his eyes was unmistakable. It was gone, likely lost during his heroic dive to save Tommy when he rolled across the asphalt. "Excuse me," Jake said to the waitress, his voice steady despite his obvious distress. "I seem to have lost my wallet during that accident outside. If I could just call someone to verify what happened, or maybe come back later with I've heard every sob story in the book, pal," interrupted Murphy himself, emerging from the kitchen with flour-dusted hands and a scowl. "You ordered the food, you pay for it, simple as that." The tension in the room thickened like smoke. Other customers began joining in with their own commentary. "Figures," muttered a man in a business suit. "Should have known better than to let him in here," added a woman with perfectly styled hair. "Call the cops," suggested another voice from the back. Jake maintained his dignity, trying repeatedly to explain about the accident, about saving the child, about his willingness to make good on the bill. But the crowd grew more aggressive with each attempt. Maya stood by the door, pastries in hand, watching the scene unfold with growing distress. She knew Jake was telling the truth. She had witnessed the accident that likely cost him his wallet. She checked her watch again. 10:15 a.m. The library closed at 2 p.m., and she desperately needed those research hours for additional scholarship opportunities. But she also thought about the small emergency fund hidden in her shoe, exactly enough money to cover Jake's meal, but also her bus fare for tomorrow's job interview across town. Without it, she would have to walk 6 hours round trip, potentially arriving too tired to make a good impression. As the crowd's hostility escalated, Maya made her choice. She walked to the counter and placed her carefully saved emergency money on the Formica surface. "I'll pay for his meal," she said clearly. The room fell silent. Then came the murmurs, shock, disapproval, and something uglier. Murphy looked at the money, then at Maya with barely concealed disdain. "You're making a mistake, girl. These people stick together. Bikers, troublemakers, birds of a feather." Maya's voice grew stronger as she spoke. 30 minutes ago, I watched this man risk his life to save a child in the street. I saw him roll under a truck to keep that boy safe. I saw him comfort Tommy when he was scared, treat him with kindness and gentleness. That's who he really is." The backlash was swift and ugly. "Figures the black girl would defend the criminal. Both of you need to learn your place, probably in it together." Murphy's face reddened. "We don't serve your kind here. Either kind. Both of you, get out. You're banned, permanently." Other customers applauded, emboldened by group support and mob mentality. Just then, the door burst open. Tommy ran inside, still excited from his morning adventure, followed by his mother Carol, a woman in her 30s with the same café au lait complexion as her son. "Grandpa Murphy," Tommy called out, running to the man behind the counter. "That's the man who saved me. He's a hero." The silence that followed was deafening. Carol confirmed her son's story, describing the accident in detail. The crowd realized their collective mistake, but awkward shuffling and avoided eye contact replaced their earlier righteous anger. Murphy's face went pale as he realized he had just banned the man who saved his own grandson. But Maya and Jake had already left, walking away with their dignity intact, but their hearts heavy with the weight of human cruelty. Outside, Jake turned to Maya, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you, that was no one's ever done anything like that for me before. How can I repay you?" Maya shook her head, preparing to walk away, but Jake gently touched her arm. "Please, after what you just sacrificed for me, you deserve to know who you were defending." And so Jake told her about his son, how his marriage fell apart because his wife couldn't handle the dangerous reputation that came with the motorcycle club. How he'd been working out of state for months, not on criminal business as people assumed, but organizing charity rides and fundraising events for children's hospitals and veterans groups. "I came back to town just to see my boy," Jake said, his voice breaking slightly. "I barely get to visit because of the custody arrangement. Everyone assumes the worst about me because of how I look, what I ride, the patches on my jacket. But you saw through all that. You saw who I really am." Maya listened, recognizing the parallels between their situations, both judged unfairly, both fighting for family, both trying to overcome circumstances beyond their control. As she prepared to leave for the library, her college application packet slipped from her bag. Jake saw it, understanding immediately that her sacrifice had been even greater than he knew. She had given up not just money, but precious time she needed for her future. Maya Thompson, he read from the application. Pre-law, civil rights. He looked up at her with new respect and a growing sense of purpose. Maya walked toward the library, knowing she had lost valuable research time but gained something more important, the knowledge that she had stood up for what was right. Behind her, Jake held her dropped application, a plan forming in his mind. That evening, Jake sat alone in his modest hotel room, staring out at the railroad tracks that divided the town like a scar. Maya's application lay open on the small table beside him. Straight A's, an essay about wanting to become a civil rights lawyer, financial need clearly documented in heartbreaking detail. He thought about his own son, about the courage Maya had shown in the bakery, about second chances, and the ripple effects of prejudice. Then he opened his laptop and began making calls. What Maya and the townspeople didn't know was that Jake Morrison wasn't just any biker. He was president of the Road Warriors, a motorcycle club that ran a legitimate charity foundation. His months away from his son hadn't been spent on criminal activities, but fundraising and organizing charity rides that had raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for various causes. Meanwhile, Maya returned home to find Grandma Rose enjoying the lemon pastries on the front porch, her face brightened by the small luxury. "How was your trip downtown, baby?" Rose asked. Maya shared a carefully edited version of what happened, standing up for someone who had been wrongly accused, the crowd's hostile reaction, how she had spent her emergency money to help. She didn't mention missing her library time, or tomorrow's transportation problem. Rose listened with a mixture of pride and worry. Though Maya didn't tell the full story, Rose sensed something significant had happened. "When I was your age," Rose said softly, "I stood up to injustice more than once. Sometimes it cost me everything I had, but it was the only way to live with myself. You can't put a price on being able to look at yourself in the mirror." That night, alone in her small bedroom, Maya questioned her choices. She had never made it to the library for scholarship research, and now she had no money for bus fare to tomorrow's job interview at the cleaning company across town. The walk would take 3 hours each way, potentially leaving her too exhausted to make a good impression. But even as doubt crept in, she knew she couldn't have done otherwise. The next morning at 5 a.m., Maya prepared for the long walk to her job interview. She dressed in her one good outfit, reviewed her prepared answers, and tried to project confidence despite the setbacks. The pre-dawn darkness felt heavy with possibility and fear in equal measure. At the same time, Jake rode through Maya's neighborhood, showing her application photo to neighbors and asking questions. Some were suspicious of the stranger on the motorcycle, but others were helpful. Finally, an elderly man gave him directions to Rose's house. Rose answered the knock at her door to find Jake standing on her porch, his motorcycle parked at the curb. Her initial fear, stranger, motorcycle, tattoos, gave way to curiosity when he mentioned Maya's kindness. "Maya, my name is Jake Morrison. Yesterday, your granddaughter showed more courage than most people show in a lifetime. She stood up for me when no one else would, and I need to thank her properly." Jake explained who he was, what Maya had done, and what it meant to him. Then he presented a scholarship check, full tuition plus living expenses for 4 years from the Road Warriors Foundation's Courage in Action Scholarship, awarded to everyday heroes who stand up for others despite personal cost. Rose was overwhelmed, suspicious of offers that seemed too good to be true, protective of Maya against potential scams. Jake patiently explained the foundation, showed documentation, and provided references she could call to verify everything. When Maya returned home at 2 p.m., exhausted from the 6-hour round trip but hopeful after a successful job interview, she found Jake and Rose talking on the porch. Her initial shock gave way to confusion as Rose explained the scholarship offer and how Jake had found them. Maya stared at the check, at Jake, at her grandmother's hopeful face. After a lifetime of closed doors, one was finally opening because she had chosen to stand up for someone else, because she had shown the courage to see past appearances to the truth underneath. "Why?" she whispered. Jake smiled. "Because yesterday you showed me what real courage looks like, and courage like that deserves to be rewarded." 4 years later, Maya Thompson walked across the stage in cap and gown, Juris Doctor degree in hand. In the audience, Grandma Rose sat in a wheelchair. Her condition had stabilized with the proper medical care the scholarship had made possible. Beside her, Jake beamed with the pride of a surrogate father, his own son now 12, and understanding who his dad really was. Maya's valedictory speech focused on justice, equality, and the courage to stand up for others. Without naming specifics, she referenced her experience in the bakery, how one moment of moral choice had shaped her entire career path. Sometimes, she told the graduating class, the most important test of our character comes not in a classroom, but in everyday moments when we must choose between what's easy and what's right. Returning to her hometown as a certified civil rights attorney, Maya found a community that had begun to change. The old neighborhood showed signs of improvement, new programs, better opportunities for kids like she used to be, and a growing understanding that prejudice hurt everyone. Maya and Jake's paths had intertwined in ways neither could have imagined. His Road Warriors Foundation partnered with her new legal aid clinic, creating a unique model where bikers and lawyers worked together for community justice. Their unexpected Grace Community Center became a beacon of hope, offering everything from after-school programs, to legal advice to scholarship opportunities. Even Murphy had experienced a transformation. The elderly baker, humbled by the realization of how wrong he had been, became one of their most vocal supporters. His grandson Tommy, now 12, volunteered at the community center and often spoke about the day the biker hero saved his life. The grand opening of the community center drew a diverse crowd, leather-clad bikers standing alongside lawyers in suits, families from all backgrounds celebrating together. The building sat symbolically at the site of the old railroad crossing, and the foundation had funded a bridge that literally connected the two sides of town. Grandma Rose, though frail, cut the ribbon with shaking hands. She had lived to see her granddaughter not just succeed, but transform an entire community. Her sacrifice and Maya's courage had multiplied into something beautiful and lasting. As the celebration continued, a young girl approached Maya nervously. She was about 17, bright-eyed but carrying the weight of poverty and limited options that Maya recognized immediately. "Miss Thompson, I heard about your scholarship program. I'm smart, but my family can't afford college, and I don't know where to start." Maya looked into the girl's eyes and saw herself 4 years earlier, scared, hopeful, desperate for someone to believe in her potential. She handed the girl a scholarship application and information about the foundation. "The most important thing to remember," Maya said gently, "is that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right even when you're afraid, even when it costs you something. That kind of courage changes everything." As the sun set over the community center, Maya and Jake stood together watching the diverse groups of people, children playing, adults learning, volunteers from every walk of life working side by side. The physical railroad tracks that once divided the town were now crossed by a bridge, but more importantly, the invisible barriers in people's minds were slowly crumbling. Jake's motorcycle club had become a force for positive change, challenging stereotypes wherever they went. Maya's legal clinic had won several important civil rights cases and helped dozens of families. Together, they had proven that the most unlikely partnerships could create the most powerful change. You know, Jake said, watching a group of children play together regardless of color or background. 4 years ago, if someone had told me a 17-year-old girl would change my entire life by buying me a cup of coffee, I'd have laughed. Maya smiled, thinking of all the lives that had been touched by that single moment of courage in Murphy's bakery. Sometimes the smallest act of courage creates the biggest change. When you stand up for someone else, you're not just changing their day, you're changing their life, your life, and maybe even the world. In the growing twilight, the community center glowed with warm light and the sound of laughter. Inside, people who might never have spoken to each other were working together, learning from each other, building something beautiful together. All it had taken was one young woman's courage to see past appearances to the truth underneath, and one man's determination to ensure that courage was rewarded. From that single moment of grace had grown something unexpected and transformative, proof that in the most ordinary places, among the most unlikely people, extraordinary change was always possible. The cycle continued as Maya mentored the next generation, teaching them that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else was more important than fear. And in a small town that had once been divided by railroad tracks and prejudice, bridges were being built every day, not just of wood and steel, but of understanding, compassion, and hope. True courage means standing up for others despite personal cost, and such courage creates ripple effects that transform communities, proving that the most powerful change often comes from the most unexpected places.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.